So here on this planet Earth, we are fortunate to have some tremendous information brought to us by Rabbi Yaakov Kronenberg, who is an astrologer, but a Jewish astrologer. And he wrote a book which actually should be in every yeshiva, but of course, yeshivas are work on the basis of Jewish law. That's it. So as far as Jewish law is concerned, the question over here is, does this fit into Jewish law? And this is this rabbi, let me just get his name because I keep mixing it up. It's Avraham Bar Chia. He's quoting him in a lot of different places. And for the book of Rabbi Avraham Bar Chia. So Rabbi Avraham Bar Chia, we already went through his lineage, and this is not a lightweight person, and this is not a lightweight subject. So let us read the next paragraph in the book of Avraham Bar Chia, after which we will look at it again. And I should say, Rabbi Avraham Bar Chia or Chacham Avraham Bar Chia. God, in the story of Abraham, our father, informed us of these matters. He informed us of the power of Israel, who are beyond the planetary influences and now have no mazel. And he informed us of the power of the stars over the nations of the world who do have mazel. The mazel means that planets really is very strong. And mazel is the Hebrew word for planet. What did he say to Abraham? He said to Abraham, Jupiter is in the west, then I move it to the east. So he said that because of the non-Jewish nations which came out from Abraham, he brought those two matters, because from Abraham came forth many nations who the stars rule over. And concerning them, he said, Jupiter is in the west, then I will move it to the east. Now that whole concept, which he says that Jupiter is in the west and he will move it to the east, I know that he means that he had been talking about this previously, that it's possible to actually change the orbits, or I'm not sure, change time. He nullified the powers of the stars for the nations, as he said to Abraham, Ishmael, your son, Ismail, will live before you, and for him I nullified the power of the constellations. And further, my covenant I will establish with Yitzchak, whose power is greater than the hosts of heaven. About Yitzchak, he said he will be called offspring, and his offspring will be established, and the stars will have no influence over them. So Rabbi Abraham wants to say that since Abraham was the father of many nations, including probably the Brahmins of the Indian society, which we understand that here they're great priests, or what they're astrologers, which if you look at their name, it comes from Avraham, the word Brahman, which is the highest class in the caste system in the Indians. He says that it comes from Avraham. It says in the Torah that he sent many of his sons to the east with gifts. And the commentaries explain that these gifts were different spiritual kinds of wisdom which Avraham taught them. And Avraham is the father of the Arabs too, for Ishmael was his son, and the Arabs came from him. So there were two sides to Avraham. On the one side, for Ishmael, and I'm pronouncing it the Jewish way, which is Yishmael instead of Ismail, and the other sons who were fathers of the non-Jewish nations, God moved Jupiter from the west to the east. Why? So the planetary influence would change and Abraham would be able to have these sons. But for Yitzchak, the father of Israel, God, one of our fathers, I guess he must have said one of our fathers, God didn't have to do that because Israel is above the planetary influence. He made the change from above the planets in the other worlds above. Now, I think I should also read out a couple of verses from the book of Genesis to you, from which Rabbi Avraham learns that these points above. So in chapter 17, verses 17-22, it says like this, and Avraham fell upon his face and laughed, and thought, can 100-year-old man have children? As for Sarah, can a 90-year-old woman give birth? Moving along. And Avraham said to God, "All that Yishmael might live before you." God said, "Nonetheless, your wife Sarah will give you a son. You should call his name Isaac, which is Yitzchak, which means like kind of laughing. And I will fulfill my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant with his offspring after him. And as for Yishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and he will be fruitful and produce many children. He will produce 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But I will remain and maintain my covenant with Isaac, who will be born to Sarah on this time next year." And when he finished speaking, God ascended from upon Avraham. So you see that there were two sons to Avraham, and later there were two types of children to him. Isaac, the Jew, who was above the planetary influences, and non-Jews who were under these influences. So you see already from there how there is a distinction between planetary influences between Israel and the rest of humanity. Let us further read from Rabbi Abraham's letter. He says, "Already we have seen from the story of Avraham that there was nothing wrong with astrology because Avraham Avinu was engaged in it." Let me just turn this slightly a little bit. And he says, "And whatever Avraham did was always what God allowed humanity." Now, and what Avraham did was astrology, because I was always engaged with humanity. Now, I read this all wrong. I'll read it again. "Already we have seen from the story of Avraham that there is nothing wrong with astrology because Avraham Avinu was engaged in it, and whatever Avraham did was always what God allowed humanity. We see it as a true science, because God did not nullify testimony of the stars on Avraham until he changed their placement and put Jupiter in the east. God had to move the stars around. Now, maybe he's saying like this: originally, Avraham was under the influence of the stars, and he understood that. So it was impossible for him to be able to have children. So because Avraham was the first Jew, but he was also well, you would say he was a non-Jew before. So at the time he became a Jew, this is what we're talking about, everything changed, and we had this expression that they actually moved Jupiter into the east from the west. God had to move the stars around, so you see that what Avraham realized regarding Jupiter's influence, and here we're not really hearing what the influence of Jupiter is, but he says that that was true. So astrology isn't nonsense. We see that the constellations rule over the nations of the world, and the testimony that the stars rule and are established over them. And if God wants to nullify it, he must remove the power of the planets, just like you saw at the beginning of Abraham's conversion into actually becoming a Jew, and nullify their influence in order to change what is going to happen to non-Jews. Furthermore, we see a fifth thing, that with the knowledge of the stars, one thing can be derived from another thing. Like it says, "The son of my house inherits me." Now, what does that mean? Since Abraham saw he couldn't have children, he realized that his faithful servant, the servant of his house, was going to inherit him. He didn't see this, rather he saw that he wouldn't have a son, and he learned from it that his servant would inherit him. This is similar to the wise man who said to a man, "Your children will be from illicit relationships." He answered him, "Where do you know this from? And where did this wisdom come from?" He said, "I saw that every woman that you will marry with a marriage covenant will be barren. And I also saw you will have children, and I derived from this that your children will be from an illicit relationship." This is how you derive knowledge from astrology. Now, I heard that, but I'm not sure exactly how we derive the knowledge. Let's see. Because one can see the chart of the first wife. If one looks at the house of marriage from the seventh, which is the seventh house in astrology, He says, and that of the second wife from the ninth house, etc. He saw the wives wouldn't have children. And he looked at the fifth house and saw the man was going to have children. So he concluded that these children were going to be from illicit relationships because his wives would not reproduce. So we see that we can use logic and conclude different things from signs which can be seen in astrology. Now, he's not getting into this in depth. He's not explaining exactly how you see it or what you understand from a birth chart. So he said, from everything we have seen up to now, we see that it's proper to study astrology and go according to it. This is Baruch Fleischman, Tikkun Elevator Kolo, and this has been Rabbi Yaakov Kronenberg, Jewish Astrology and Cosmic Science.